Yeah, that's sort of a good segue into what I was thinking. And again, I'm just looking at this with as mathematical an approach as possible with an eye towards fairness on what was requested and what was recommended. And there's one anomaly that jumps out a little bit to me, and that's item 4 under the community grants, which is the gymnastics club. And just wondering if there's a way, considering that there is more in the pot for the fall grants and aid, I don't know if we can play with those figures from the grants and aid to community core grants. But that just, again, this is a very difficult thing to try to come to grips with, considering the variables within each equation. But it just seems to me from a mathematical approach that that one's a little low compared to the others. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an item to talk about.
Being the devil's advocate again, mathematical has nothing to do with that. Each of the merit applications should be evaluated on the merits of the application. And we shouldn't look at it on the basis that just because you ask, you get something.
No, but I think the presentation indicated that there is significant benefit to the community along the merits of what the policy and the application stipulates.
I would just add to that, we're also keeping clear that we are keeping a tight budget. When we did our as a result of the financial committee and our recommendations and so forth, we were going to keep things down. So when something comes along that is, let's say, considerably higher than something that was asked for in the past, then obviously there's a serious, extra serious consideration that's got to take place, because we're constrained by our overall budget and our desire to keep our increase down to the level that it's at.
And I'm just wondering, I find the increase to this historians, and this is with all due respect to Mr. Hanley over there, but I find the increase to the historians, like, they know that the limit of what we've got to spend is down from last year, and yet the increase is like double of what they got last year. And,
In all fairness, they've asked for that increased amount for a couple of years.
That's traditional.
whether they asked for it.
request.
Well, no, I know, I understand that, but then they, then in years gone by, we've given them half of what they've requested, and the same thing comes forward today, and I don't quite follow it, because in my opinion, I'm not trying to be a jock, but I think when 300 people are involved in sports or in a club, and they come to us and say they need $4,000 for something that seems to be fairly reasonable, and we say, well, no, we can only give you, roughly speaking, 25% of what you're asking for, $1,000. And the historians, I'm not sure, that $50,000 is going to make a dent in what they're asking for, or what they need it for. I'm having difficulty putting the two together. And I know it's important to Mr. Hanley, it's important to anybody who's interested in history, and we're going to have steamship days. People are interested in the history of this place. There's no question about it. But I find it really difficult. We're constrained by our finances, and to hand out extra money to people or to groups, and not hand out extra money to other groups. I find it very difficult. Tim?
Well, I've been on that side of this issue a few times, and this has to be one of the most frustrating processes. On that side or this side that I've ever been involved in, that it creates huge resentment in the community, because some people go away typically with almost everything they ask for, and others sometimes go away with nothing. There's no way for applicants to know how much money is available. That's not part of the application process.
It's in our budget.
Well, if they look at, it was the budget wasn't prepared before before the applications were, was it?
Oh, sorry, I was calculating.
Our budget was not prepared before the applications came?
That's correct, the applications were due January 31st,
Ah,
and
So
for the community grants.
So people have really no idea how big the pot is.
Mhm.
And if you come back to the table traditionally, you know that you're gonna get cut. So there then becomes a natural tendency to ask for more than you want. I think that this whole process, obviously we're not gonna do it here and now and today, but this whole process has to be revamped somehow. And you either decide who's worthy and you make a number of smaller core grants instead of one large one and everybody goes begging, or we find some other system, but this is not fair to the community. And like I said, it creates huge resentment.
mhm.
And I don't know, I looked at this, how many ways are there to do this fairly?
Just slice it
You
up.
give all the little people exactly what they have, the little grants exactly what they ask for because it's an important amount to them,
Mhm.
and take the rest proportionally off the people that are asking for more. I mean, what's fair here? How do you decide what merit is?
Well, there is a set of criteria, so you
That's
look
true.
at them. And
But it's
one,
your personal values that you decide.
no, but
that
one of the
merit.
criteria is a demonstrated financial need, and two of the applications, our grant increases their surplus from their operations.
Well, yeah, and I get
And
those.
in the $2,000 pot ones, there was a council resolution passed many years ago that recognized the concept of core grant, and that idea was that they would get a stable grant plus maybe the cost of inflation. But some of those bases have been jacked up
Yes,
significantly,
yeah.
and others haven't. And then, so it's very hard, you have to look at the criteria and then rank them in order, and the policy doesn't set out a ranking, and that's been part of the problem, and part of the problem is people are very reluctant to say no. It's interesting with the gym club's grant, the amount they're asking for precisely equals the amount of rent. And the rent, we're taking into income on the other side next year with, or this current year, if the joint use agreement goes through as we've contemplated it, the grant is money out this side, which we'll get back in the other side. I mean, they're saying they've got increased costs because of the rent for the school gym, but that's a program that's not being run under the auspices of the rec society, or the rec committee. Recreation department, so, do we say scale your program back and run it as a recreation program? And if you want to run the extra competitive, international, whatever side of it, then that's a personal choice. There's all these discussions, and I don't know how you wade your way through them.
May I speak to that a little bit, or am I allowed to speak to that?
I don't know, that was a question I had.
Okay.
Followed that debate since we became a municipality, and I've seen the pain previous
Yeah.
councils.
Mhm.
It's always painful
Mhm.
because hardly any group is ever going out here and
Happy.
happy. I'm not sure how other municipalities deal with it.
It's very troublesome.
Very troublesome. So there are obviously no easy answers. But to rank this as to who deserves the most, the probably a few kind of measures you could apply. Customarily, the bigger a membership is, it implies that more users, more paying members, they should probably treat it differently than the smaller one. I'm not suggesting that we should follow that. I don't want to be driven off the island. It's just somehow we have to find a method to inject rationality. And then another thing, and I hate to raise it, but it has to be raised, the percentage of the municipal grant versus the total expense. There are huge differences here. If our grant for some groups makes 10% and for others 50%, then we know that actually the recipient of that much has a financial problem. They would collapse without the municipality. Probably that group should be somehow restructured, be made more independent from constant grants. A lot of departments in the municipality, they couldn't support themselves. Road maintenance, I mean, they are just expense. The taxpayer has to expect to fund for it. Will we find the answer today? No. But wasn't that an initiative the last council, the
Yes.
last
I
year?
remember
actually?
Maris speaking.
There's pool, and
Yeah,
Allison
and-
Morris, we're
and
going to have
I've written 2 or
ranking
3
system
papers,
for
and we
this
did a
term.
ranking system. And we gave a spreadsheet to everybody last year to rank them. And not everybody filled it out. But the problem is you've got a list of criteria, and it's hard to weed somebody out on that basis. But one of the criteria is that they have to have 50% of their funding has to be from sources other than the municipal grant. So I was quickly looking through here, and I think that's
That's number 13.
but I think everybody, 50% of their funding is from the municipal grant, is from more than the municipal grant. With the Arts Council, their application, they've got a huge revenue number in there for gallery sales, but there's an equally huge cost of sales number down below, so you sort of have to net those two numbers when you're looking at their revenue number. We tried way back in the beginning to have a committee, and a committee made recommendations, and everybody wanted to get into the details of every application, which is why we've ended up doing this. Treasurers have tried desperately by sending a spreadsheet out and saying, well, we'll knock off the lowest, and we'll knock off the highest, and we'll average the others to come up with some sort of numerical. Other times we've had counselors write in and say, well, they're all good, let's just prorate it equally amongst all of them. So the criteria is there, it's just really hard to apply it. And Maris and I both agreed on that. We can add a few more checklists, they're getting better, they've all got balance sheets this year and stuff like that, and reports of what they've done with the money, but it's really hard. So short of going and looking at some other communities to say, the standard rule of thumb is X dollars per head for arts and culture, and we asked the Community Foundation one year if they would consider looking at it for us, and they turned us down, so.
So what's the answer?
The answer is,
So
we have to vote on it one by one, and
I don't know whether we're attempting to try and nail this down today, but in a move in that direction, I would suggest one thing, that we do say that we do set aside $6,000 for the fall cycle, which is more or less pretty static, and which then allocates $4,854 that could be spent on the smaller grants, the spring aid grants. And we go down the numbers one by one and see what we agree on.
I suggest you go through it and set the ones that you're all agreed on. You could set that aside and then go back to the more difficult ones after that. Or at least it starts chunking off or weeding out what you're.
So some people at least can get a resolution of this.
And if there's any disagreement, you move on to that one and deal with that.
Deal with it.
Karen,
I wanted to paint a visual that I used last year. I don't know if it's helpful or not, but for me, I find analogies sometimes helpful. The total pot of 140,000 is about $61 per taxpayer if we take our 2,312 taxpayers. It's not really, because everybody's assessed differently and it's based on your value of your assessed property. But if you read the statement of intent, the community grants or the grants in aid are to improve the well-being of the Bowen Island community as a whole. So if we tasked every 2,312 taxpayers with the 61 loonies, and we set up some pails on the way down to the ferry, and we imagined which pail they would throw, you know, pails 1 through 14 of the requests, which pail would they throw their loonies into? For me, that helps me visualize the community as a whole. How would they choose to spend that $61? Each community member. So if you can think about who you report to, which is the community, the people who have elected you, be it seniors, be it young people, be it artistic people, be it gymnastic people, be it theater people, and you know, think about all the different requests, the scouts, the historians, and think about what the right use is of that $61, and not just $61, but 61 loonies, and which pail would they throw their loonies into. For me, that really helps me with a visual of maybe what the right thing to do is for the community as a whole. I don't know if that helps or not.
Easy to say.
I know. I know. I just thought I'd paint a picture, see if that helps.
Maybe we should start at the top of the list then and see how people feel about. And if we can reach a consensus on some, we follow our CAO's advice and move that aside and go back to the ones that we don't agree with. Is that okay with everybody?
Seems about as democratic as it can be. Under the circumstances.